Okay, recording is back. Next up, let's talk about animation and motion. Some of this may seem pretty obvious in the things that you're looking for good animation, but we're going to go through it just so that I can hit on the important points. So, the first thing you want to look at is the fluidity of your animation. Are they smooth? Do they feel natural and responsive to the world? Frame rate is very important. If your frame rate dips when animations happen, then there's an issue technically with the game, and that can negatively affect your the fluidity of your animations. Um, Next up, let's talk style. So, does the style, like everything else in a game's visual design, does the style fit the game's world? If you're doing something that's incredibly realistic, like Last of Us Part 2, for instance, they're doing a hyper realistic, high fidelity look and feel and very realistic world. So, a lot of their animations, including combat, takedowns, and gunplay, um, basic movement cycles and sneaking and things like that, they all are as realistic as possible. And the um, animation style is very close to that. And a lot of that design, a lot of those design elements come from um, motion capture and things where you get hyper realistic um, motions. Or is it more exaggerated, more cartoonish, or anime, or um, big, explosive, fun looking stuff? So, like you're in, say, Persona 5, discussed earlier, or Hollow Knight, things are way more exaggerated there. They're more popping and magical and, well, for lack of a better word, animated. So that's does that make sense? And you bring it back into the overall style of the game. Do those animation styles make sense in the world that the game exists in? Um, and then finally, there's feedback. So, do the animations provide your feedback to the player? Do they, when you punch an enemy, does the enemy respond in a way that would make sense? If you shot an enemy, do they, flinch or respond by reacting to where they were shot? Um, in a more exaggerated art style, if you were to do a very large attack animation, do enemies fly away or fly up in the air or fall off of cliffs, things like that? Um, and do those reactions make sense? Do they communicate the correct information to the player? Um, if you were to do like a really light, say like a finger flick on an enemy, do they fly off into the sunset? It's probably not the response that a player is expecting for something as low energy as that. Um, and we're going to touch a little on UI design. UI, user interface, UX, user experience. Um, Very important, possibly one of the most important things in game design, because it's something that, while not um, as glamorous as super cool animations or sound design, is something that the player interacts with the most during a game and is very important because of that. So you want to make sure your UI is clear, efficient, and has the correct aesthetic. Um, the image that I post, or that I've added to this slide, is somebody's custom UI in World of Warcraft. Now, that's something that works for that player and has been designed by them to work. However, if this were the default design of World of Warcraft's UI, players would have no idea what's going on. There's obviously a lot of graphics, a lot of text boxes, bars, um, popping up text, and things like that that only make sense in context of what they're doing, but wouldn't make sense for a player who's not in that situation, raiding against a boss in a dungeon. So what you want to do is to make sure, when you look at UI, make sure that it is easy to read and understand. Um, Also, you want to make sure that it is easy to use and intuitive. So, efficiency is important. Can players navigate the menus easily? Do they have to click through a lot of different options to get to the menu that they're looking for? One of my biggest pet peeves is, especially in more recent games that I played, is a cluttered UI or user experience inside of menus. So I've cannot play a Monster Hunter game because the menus are way too inefficient for me. There's way too many of them. Knowing where to go and how to click through to get into them is very difficult for me. So I tend to stay away from games that have those super complex UIs that are not easy to navigate. Effective UI in RPGs can be things like actually the base UI for World of Warcraft, where things are pretty easy to click through to get exactly to the menu you want to go to. In World of Warcraft, and I can't really show it from this, but actually, if you see where my mouse is, this bar here, this is the regular option bar, or toolbar. It has all of the things that you need right there at your fingertips: your player or your character, your skills, your talents, your achievements, so on and so forth. Very easy to navigate. Finally, aesthetically, does the game match, or does the UI match the game's style? Like everything else, it's very important to keep players in the world that you're trying to build by making sure things match the style throughout the entire experience. A high fantasy RPG like an Elder Scrolls shouldn't have a UI that looks like Fallout, right? They're very similar UIs developed by Bethesda, very similar functionality, but very different look. And something that you want to avoid is breaking the player out of the experience by giving them a bunch of clunky UI elements that don't make sense in the world. Which leads us to our next point, avoiding the looks good, feels bad scenario. What I mean by this is making sure that even if your game looks 100% hyper realistic, it looks better than, I'm going to keep using it for the example, better than The Last of Us and everything, but it plays horribly, slows down frame rate, very choppy, very hard to navigate or hard to execute combat because of that. You want to avoid that. And games that have super low frame rates and try to be super fantastic in their design elements really create feels bad moments for players. So you want to prioritize your playability. You want to make sure that your visuals don't drop your performance. If your combat causes your frame rate to drop every single time that you're in combat, you need to do something to change that, whether it's an overall performance update, whether it's something in your lighting, or if it's something in, say, your special effects, your particle effects. If there are a lot of particle effects when you're swinging your sword around, those are things that can affect gameplay. You want to look for those to make sure that that is not what's causing performance issues. Developers will test those things extensively. This is what QA is for. You want to make sure that you find and eliminate the issues with low frame rates, with choppy animations, and things like that. These tests are very technical, and you can tell when a game hasn't done them because those things kind of run wild. You can get memory leaks, crashes, and things like that, even when you're on top quality hardware and should be able to run something effectively. If it's not optimized by the developer, then you'll run into issues. Balance your style and function. Again, aesthetics are important, but you want to make sure that what you're doing is aesthetically pleasing, but also doesn't affect gameplay negatively. It's a balance. It's definitely a balance, especially if you're looking at, say, UI elements, and you want to make sure that those UI elements feel correct, but also that don't drag down the experience. That's that balance that you have to work on and think about when looking at it critically. Okay, so that is going to be our visual design presentation for today. Next up, we're going to talk audio design. So check out that video in the next part of the module. Okay, be back in